Farmers today are facing rising costs, volatile markets, and extreme weather. The A Better Way to Farm podcast digs into strategies to help you take control of farm inputs and maximize profit so your farm can thrive for generations. Remember to take advantage of our free resources at abetterwaytofarm.com. Now, from America's Heartland, here's your host.
Hello and welcome to today's episode. I am super excited to share with you. Rod here at A Better Way to Farm, where we increase yields and improve profits. One of the questions that keeps coming up is, how do I get set up for liquid? I know that to be judicious with my money, I need to go to row play starter. I know I need to start using micronutrients. I get all of that, but I'm afraid of the cost and the difficulty of setting up my planter to go to a liquid system. And I have great news for everyone. Here's the deal. I have a really good friend from Minnesota who has been my go-to guy when I have questions on equipment, and he has helped me many, many times, and he's helped a lot of our people too. I'd like to welcome to our call, Jeff. Jeff, thank you for taking time.
Thanks, Rod. I appreciate the invite.
Well, it's been a pleasure to get to work with you over the last few years here, and you've worked with us as far as marketing product. You've worked with me, have given me advice on a lot of different things. And one of your big things that you've been able to do is really help us on this equipment side. So let's dive right in here. The guy's decided that he knows he needs to do this, but he's went to his local implement dealer and he has come to the conclusion that it's going to be ultra expensive to set up his planter. Jeff, talk to us. If we're going to row place 7 gallon or less of micros and fertilizer, and we got a 12 row planter, talk to us about an introductory system. What does it look like? Ballpark on what's it going to cost, because I know everyone will be specific, but we can get a range. And how hard is it to actually install that equipment?
Those are all great questions. I guess the first question I ask a guy, and I'm just going to walk through how I handle the conversation when the guy calls me, is the most important question is the kind of planter you have, because your most common planters are your reds and your greens. The system is simple, but the tank mounts and things become the complication when you get more, and I hate to say off-branded colors, but the ones that aren't as popular. You can be as simple or as complicated as you want. I'm kind of a simple guy, so I like simple things. So a basic system on a planter, let's use a 12-row John Deere planter just for easy figuring. That's pretty common. JD green systems are, let's just say. You know, we can do an electric pump. We can do a piston, wheel-driven pump, or we can do hydraulic. In most cases, guys are like, no, I want it to be pretty simple. I want it to be cost-effective. So we do an electric system. You have your tank or tanks, depending on your bar that mount on the system. And then you have your flow regulator, or your flow sight gauges, we call them, essentially that show that there's flow going to each row. And then you have your lines you run down to the unit. Each line going to the unit has what we call an orifice in it to manage our flow. The common things that guys think about is, well, I got to have radars, I got to have all this kind of stuff. Liquid systems are simple. It's basically pressure and speed, essentially, is all it is. You drive a certain speed, you run a certain pressure, you run this orifice that regulates your flow to the row. It comes out very close. It works very easy. When you get past that point to go down to the ground, then there's a couple, 3 options to apply it in the trench. If you're not doing soybeans, guys use totally tubular. There's rebounders, there's Keaton seed firmers. Those are all very simple to do. And essentially, when you get all done, you're going to spend about, for a simple system on a 12-row planter, somewhere between that $300 and $320 a row. So on a 12-row planter, $3,500 to $4,000 is a complete system to go onto the planter. Very simple. Installation, I've got guys that are scared, or that I wouldn't say scared. They're not very handy. And I got guys that are expert mechanics. When you get the tanks, in most cases, there's a diagram where it mounts on the planter, because everything's about weight balance on the planter, so that the frame can handle the weight of the tank or tanks that you're adding. And then essentially, as you figure out where you want your pump and your lines to be mounted, there's a quick fill attach that goes in the back. You set your flow indicator gauges. They usually do 6 rows at a time, so 1 on each side. You run your main lines through that. You run your quarter lines to each row. It's zip ties, and you attach it all up. I had one guy put a 12-row 1760 planter on. He did it in a day. He's a good guy, but he got it all done in a day. And he needed a little bit of help putting the tanks on. Otherwise, he did everything by himself.
I had a friend one time that I went and helped put it on, and we got all done. And he said, Rod, I really appreciate you coming down. It just took us 2 full days. And he said, I'm pretty sure if you hadn't been here, I could have done it in a day and a half. So I guess what you're saying is that I might come under that not very handy category, is what you're telling me.
Well, they're maybe their worst enemy in some cases, in them cases, but they're very simple to run, very simple to use. I mean, there isn't a lot of bells and whistles on them. You can do that kind of stuff. That just adds cost as you go along.
And I think, Jeff, as we look at this, I'm excited because now all of a sudden we've taken out the fear and I know if we go to our local dealer, I've literally had guys tell me that they want $2,000, $3,000 a row to set up, but they're talking about probably doing 2x2 culvers, which in most cases we don't need. For right now, we're trying to row place in the seed trench what we're going to do, and you're talking about probably using a rebounder or a Keaton seed firmer with a splitter on the end. And all in at $4,000. And all of a sudden that is doable because your increased profits from the first year will many times overpay for that. And That's a fantastic opportunity. So a day and a half, easy to hook up. And all of a sudden it's probably here as we set mid-February, it's probably time to be making a decision though and getting equipment ordered so we can get it in time to get it installed. Would you agree with that?
Yes, very much.
Let's talk about, we want to move up. I would like something a little nicer. Instead of maybe sight gauges, what would be the next step up? What could I do? Say, what can I do for $8,000 to $12,000? What can I get for bells and whistles that I'm not getting for $4,000?
Well, essentially, some guys don't like electric, so then maybe you want to go with a piston pump or hydraulic, and that adds. You have a return to your tanks in them cases. In a hydraulic system, there's a return. In a wheel driven, you don't have to have a return, but some guys want to have a shut off involved where they shut half the planter off, things like that. Some guys want to tie it to their monitor in the cab and things like that. So then you add a flow meter and things like that. And you can get down to row indicators and things like that. Now, when it gets to the technology side, it's really hard to match that because there's a lot of monitors and a lot of equipment out there. And so essentially is what we found to work best is we get the plan system on the planner. We get it to the point to where their technology hooks to that, where it's a wiring harness that hooks in. And then they work with their monitor, their company, their Deere, their ag leader, their whoever it is they have in the cab to go from that point on, because you can't keep enough harnesses and things around to match everybody's system. But for bells and whistles, the flow indicator gauges are a nice thing because you always know what flow is per row. If you want to step away from that, you can add variable orifices in. So let's say you're doing high-speed planner and you're speeding up and you're slowing down. Your orifices can only manage so much flow versus speed and pressure. So then you can add variable rate orifices, and you can spend another $100 a row adding something like that. And what they'll do is there's a spring in them and they open and they close based on your speed and the pressure. So there's a lot of little things you can add here and there. So if you want to go to a piston pump system so that you don't have the electricity to deal with when you let the planter down, it's running off one of the drive wheels in the planter, you're going to add another $140, $50 a row to go that. If you're going to go hydraulic, it's similar to that. The technology side, I stay away from that just because there's so much out there. It's hard you don't know what to carry.
I know, and I totally agree with that. And that's kind of a specialized deal. But I mean, now all of a sudden we're talking about if we add the piston pump and we add the variable rate orifices, and now all of a sudden we're still only somewhere in that neighborhood of $7,000. And we have a very nice system that's capable of doing everything. One thing I do like about the ground drive pumps is I never forget to turn it on.
Correct. And the one thing on the electric pumps is we have what's called the whisker switch we have on. It's a magnet you throw on the frame somewhere. So when you lift up, it flips the switch. When you lift down, it flips the switch. So it turns it on and off. So we think of them things because I know how it is when you go across the field and you forget to turn that switch on. And it's a good education, but you don't want it to happen very often.
No, that would not be our design at any rate. So we'd want to do that. So we're looking at an intro system for $4,000, and we make no mistake. Jeff, would you agree? We have a lot of people out there with that system, and they're getting along great, and they're very happy with it.
A lot of people like that. Yep. A lot of
hundreds. And I think as we start looking at this year, I had somebody call me the other day, and they were talking about what they felt. What do I need to buy in the way of equipment? They were just looking for advice. Had nothing to do with what we do. And I just said, man, I don't know, but here's what I do know. Borrowing money at 8-10% interest, I'm not buying anything, and I don't absolutely have to, and can't justify showing me a big profit. It might be nice, but I'm not going to do it if I don't have to.
Yep, that's very true. And another thing that guys don't think about sometimes is the advantage of having the liquid systems is we're getting into a lot of insect pressure, rootworms and things like that. So adding a dosatron to these things to inject insecticide in, or even some micronutrients at times in certain cases, you have a liquid system, you need that. That's a carrier anyway. So there's an advantage to maybe adjust the traits in their corn or do some things like that, or maybe have to add insecticide. So it fits that bill too. It's easy to add in if you ever want to upgrade or change things. It's just as simple as cutting a line, adding a flow meter, or adjusting a line to a dosatron, and this system works in your favor.
Are you seeing some of the companies that provide insecticides willing to pay for the dosatron if they're willing to make a 2 or 3 year commitment?
Yes. If you have enough acres, it could be paid in a year. If you don't have enough acres, it might be spread out over 1 or 2 years. But yeah, definitely.
And I like a dosatron system while we're on this subject, because my deal is I don't like to have insecticide or fungicides in my fertilizer in case I have to work on the system.
Correct.
Right now you're using our fertilizer, using our micronutrients. There's nothing in there that's going to harm you if you get it on your skin. The minute we introduce pesticides into that, now all of a sudden we've got a problem.
Right.
And I just prefer that dosatron. I just think it's a really good idea. You agree with that?
I do. And it's a cost effective. I mean, you can put a dosatron on for, depending on the percentage pump you need, but $1,300 to $2,000 to add into a system. So it's not super expensive for what and you can use it for more than just the insecticide side of it too,
Well, I see guys using it when they're planting soybeans as a way to maybe put on something that's not necessarily compatible with the fertilizer, but they can dose it in right at the end. And it's a good way there's a lot of reasons to use a dosatron. I see great merit in that. Jeff, let's go ahead and let's talk about a Cadillac. And now this is where it really gets wild because there's so many options out here. But let's talk about all of the different things that they can do that are really high tech, high dollar. What are the advantages to those? And what kind of money can we wrap up in that?
That gets pretty crazy. I mean, when you start getting to the high dollar and then you're variable rating your flows, or you're putting in a precision system into the trench where you're separating out and running multiple products in there, it's suddenly you need multiple pumps, or you need a hydraulic system, a pump to manage the flow. It gets pretty crazy in that cost. You can take that price and probably double it by the time you're done adding in some of them in-furrow systems. You can add another $300 a unit with some of the precision technology. And then it's amazing what it can do and how you can vary things into it. The system doesn't change a lot. It's more add-ons to in the furrow. And if you start going to where you want hydraulic or you want individual row shutoffs, all that kind of stuff, tying in your monitors, it adds up extremely fast. Like I said, the system stays pretty basic. It's more just you add it in the trench, or you're adding it just stuff of rate controllers and things like that into it.
But I think one of the cool things is a person can start, right now we're in an environment where we're still kind of struggling with, I call it $8 inputs and $4 corn, which the corn's a little better than that. We're not in a position where we were 3 years ago. And so you can start with a $4,000 to a $7,000 system, and make no mistake, a $7,000 system is a great system.
Oh yes.
And if you spread that out over 1,000 acres, you're talking about $7.
Yeah.
And it doesn't take very long to pile up an extra $7, or maybe you save $7 off of a dry broadcast program and you go back to a row place knowing you're more efficient. But nonetheless, down the road, they come in, they like it. Talk to us. How hard is it to come in and then do an upgrade with what you already have?
Yes, it's very simple to add on to it because the basic parts of the system don't change. It's more just disconnecting. If you have a rebounder in the ground on the system that's doing your application and you want to go in and add your precision system in to where you're getting some seed firming action, you're getting where there's giving you certain readings of soil temp as you go, all that kind of stuff. It's essentially an attachment, and then maybe some adjustments to your line connections and stuff like that into the bottom of the plant of the unit. And then some cases where we need more flow because they're splitting it, they're doing a type of system where they're dropping some on the side of the row plus in the trench, then we might have to add another pump and things like that. But the basic guts of the system stay the same. It's more just adding on specialty things onto the bottom of the system, or tying it into your monitor so you're tracking your flow rates per unit, all that kind of stuff. It's endless of what you can do when it comes to technology. And that gets to be a little bit out of where I don't get involved in it as much that way.
Sure, absolutely. I think one of the things is, as we look at a rebounder or a seed firmer, and I have a personal preference, but I really don't get involved in that argument because people have things that they like and they do it for their reasons, and that's great. But I do get some guys, they say, hey, what if I move from a $40, roughly $40, $50 a row, in the rebounder or
Yep.
the Keaton, and I move over to the furrow jets.
Yes.
Do you have any feelings on those furrow jets that are going to run what, $350 to $400 a row?
I don't sell them personally. The ones I have priced out, that seems to be where they run. And they've improved. So there's older ones and newer ones. So the worst part was connecting to the older ones. Now the newer ones have so you can remove the orifices out of your system in most of the furrow jets. And then the orifices are built into the furrow jet system, essentially. And if you need to change them, you change them down there. It's more, some of them have individual lines. And I've had guys set them up where they do 4 lines to the furrow jet or 3 lines, however many they're using on it. And I have some guys that run 1, but then it splits it and does it that way. But in most cases, when we're doing a furrow jet, we're increasing our flow some too. So we have to increase our capacity to go to that line. And if it's enough, we may have to go away from our 1/4-inch line coming from our flow indicators or wherever we're running from our T where we're splitting things off. We may have to run a bigger line. And that's just hosing and clamps, and that stuff's simple and easy. It's not a major cost. It's more just kind of the time factor of it. So
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Jeff, any parting shots here? I don't want to keep you. I appreciate your time. I know you've given us a pretty good charge of time here, and I'm thankful for it. Anything you'd like to say in closing as we wrap this subject up?
I just want to thank Rod for the opportunity to kind of give some insight, some information. I just want everybody to know that when it comes to planters and equipment, if you're interested or anybody's thinking about doing anything, the most common planters that things are made for, and I hate to say this, are red and green, and that's pretty common and pretty easy to mount things on. The one thing I get a lot of calls on, and I hate to say Kinseys, but I get a lot of calls on Kinseys, and they're great planters. But when people have interplants and things like that, it's very challenging to mount tanks and equipment on them and very hard to get contact drives and things like that for them just because of the way they're designed. And it's not a fault in there. They're great planters. It's just that you might have to do a little more work on your own in them cases than what we were able to do, or you might have to be a little bit more of an engineer at home on how to mount your tanks, because we can provide with so many different options out there. But otherwise, I mean, it's easy. It's an amazing way to put your products on. And I think once guys go to it, they see the value in it and how easy it is, and they don't look back.
Absolutely. And that's the key. They don't look back. Well, folks, if you'd like to talk about more equipment, feel free to reach out to A Better Way to Farm. Jeff is super busy, and so we're going to drive you to see Karen. You can always text him at 641-919-5570. Jeff is a great resource for our team. He has just helped a lot of our people as they're getting started to take a look and say, hey, how am I going to implement using your system, using the starter, using the micronutrients, and doing the right things? Never wrong to do the right thing. Jeff, thank you for your time. To all of our listeners, we appreciate you. If you find value in what we do, share us with a friend. And as always, we really do hope you guys are having a better day.